what if you were asked to count the words in a book? Or even just in the sentence? Sounds pretty easy, right?
Hey, yeah, you'd think so.
But the truth is, defining and counting words, it's surprisingly complex, almost, philosophical.
It really is.
So today we're diving deep into the intricate world of word lists. Our mission in this deep dive to unpack the fascinating science behind how these lists are made, why building them requires such meticulous planning and critical decisions,
Yeah?
and ultimately how they profoundly shape the way we learn, teach, and even test language.
Right.
And our guide for today's deep dive comes from excerpts of the book Making and Using Word Lists for Language Learning and Testing by ISP Nation and his collaborators.
It's remarkable, isn't it, how a task that seems so straightforward, like just counting words, it turns into this quest to define the very building blocks of communication. It really makes you wonder, when we talk about words, what exactly are we counting? And why does that precise definition matter so much, especially, for anyone trying to gain knowledge quickly and efficiently?
Okay, let's unpack this then. The first twist in counting words comes right at the beginning. It's distinguishing between types and tokens.
Ah, yes, types and tokens, crucial difference.
Think of it this way. If you take the sentence, these are the technical terms which are used in the book. Okay.
Got it.
It has 9 types of words, meaning 9 different unique words.
Hmm.
But if you count every single word, including the repeats like the and are,
Yeah.
you end up with 11 tokens.
Right. Total instances versus unique items.
It's subtle, maybe, but a really crucial distinction. So when you ask, how large is my vocabulary, you're really talking about word types.
Right. And once you grasp that difference between types and tokens, you realize the fundamental decision is, well, what constitutes a word in the first place?
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
Exactly. For example, do we count numbers like 626 or, 1,000?
Good question.
What about mixed forms like U2 or R2D2? Are they words?
Or even sounds people make.
Yes. Are exclamations like "are" or hesitations like, are they truly words, even if they're not in a standard dictionary?
Okay, that's already complicated.
And it gets even trickier with punctuation.
Mm-hmm.
Does a hyphen mean long-term is one word or two?
Right, or long term with a space.
And capitalization.
Oh.
Does it distinguish words like book, book, and book? Or brown, that name from brown, the color.
Oh.
Every single one of these decisions, it impacts the final count and, subsequently the word list itself.
So, okay, after all that, what does this actually mean for someone, learning a language? It feels like this basic unit of counting what you actually define as a word has a really direct impact on how vocabulary is taught and assessed.
Absolutely. It has to. And when we zoom out a bit, we see the different units of counting are used depending on the specific purpose. So for receptive knowledge, like reading or listening, what we call lemmas are often a very sensible unit.
Lemmas. Remind me.
Lemmatization basically groups words by their base form, plus its regular inflections. So study, studied, studies, and studying would all just be counted under the single lemma study.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Then there's a broader grouping called word families. This also includes derivational affixes.
So things like prefixes and suffixes.
Exactly, like unhappy comes from happy or government from govern. The source mentions Bauer and Nation's levels, noting level 2 as the lemma, like we just said, and level 6 as a much more inclusive word family.
Why the different levels?
Well, this idea of word families is incredibly useful for what they call morphological problem solving when you're reading or listening.
Okay, like figuring out word parts.
Precisely. If you know business and you know the ending like, you can probably understand business-like, even if you've never seen that specific word before.
Right, makes sense.
So this makes word families particularly valuable for, understanding input, for receptive skills.
But maybe not for speaking or writing.
Well, that's the nuance. For productive knowledge, speaking or writing, maybe word types or just lemmas might be more appropriate. Different forms, like studied versus studying, need specific grammatical understanding. Right?
Yeah, you need to know how to use them.
And they might have different collocations, words they typically go with. So for active use, maybe treating them as more distinct units makes sense. You wouldn't just, use the base form study in every single context.
Wow, okay. That's already way more complex than I imagined for just counting words. But I bet language throws even more curveballs, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
English, especially with its delightful quirks. It often gives us words that look or sound alike but mean wildly different things.
The infamous homoforms.
Exactly. It's not just confusing for learners, it's a fundamental challenge for how we build these vocabulary lists. So these homoforms, first you have homonyms. Same spelling, same sound, different meaning. Like bank, river bank, money bank.
Classic example.
Then there are homographs. Same spelling, but different sounds and different meanings. Like close, C-L-O-S-E, meaning near, versus close, meaning to shut.
Right, the verb and the adjective. Different pronunciation.
And finally, homophones. Same sound, but different spellings and different meanings. Like I, E-Y-E versus the letter I.
Yep. It's a linguistic minefield, as you said.
Totally.
And it's striking how this level of detail leads to really specific recommendations in the source material. For instance, they suggest counting homonyms and homographs as separate entries, especially the high-frequency ones.
Separate entries. So treat bank, river, and bank money as two different words on the list.
Essentially, yes, if they're common enough. They actually point out that 17 homonyms and 4 homographs just in the first 2,000 English words should probably be separated.
17. Wow.
Yeah. Consider the word nail, N-A-I-L. The overall word family occurs like over 2,400 times in the British National Corpus.
Yeah.
That's a lot. But if you separate its meanings, nail, like a building fastener versus nail on your finger or toe, the building use accounts for maybe 70% of those occurrences. So if you counted them separately, maybe neither individual use would meet a typical high-frequency threshold to make it onto a core list.
Ah, I see. So that decision, one word or two, dramatically impacts what gets taught early on.
Profoundly. Yeah.
And it's not just words like nail, is it? Proper names must be another headache.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about words like brown, the color versus brown, someone's name. They usually refer to unique things, people, places, and they're capitalized.
Right. And historically, I think the assumption was often, well, you'll just pick these up in context, like figuring out who the characters are when you read a novel.
Seems reasonable, maybe.
But then we have to ask, is that assumption always true? There's research showing that actually having prior knowledge of proper names significantly improves comprehension, especially when listening.
Okay, that makes sense. If you don't know who Johnson is, the sentence might not make much sense.
Exactly. Plus, there's the challenge of just identifying them accurately. So many common words can also be proper names. Think about Mark, Bill, Bush, May, or Green, White.
Right, loads of them.
So the recommendation here is pretty crucial. Treat proper names as a separate category. And their homonymic uses should be distinguished, like pat the name versus pat the gentle tap.
Okay.
Otherwise, you might be miscounting what a learner actually knows or really needs to know.
It sounds like we're constantly making these choices about how to carve up the language. What about words that kind of blur the lines, like short term, sometimes hyphenated, sometimes maybe run together as short term, or just spaced out as short term? Hyphens often signal a close relationship, right?
They do, and that connects to transparent compounds too. Words like classroom.
Ah, yeah. You can easily understand classroom from class and room.
Precisely. And you've hit on another key point there.
Yeah.
If we count compounds like classroom as entirely brand new, unknown words, well, we can really inflate the vocabulary burden for a learner. Unnecessarily, maybe.
Right, because they might already know the parts.
Exactly. So the argument for splitting transparent compounds into their parts, counting classroom as class and room, is actually very strong.
Why is that better?
It allows for more consistent counting, for one thing. And it better reflects how the meaning is actually derived. Plus, like you said with short term, many compounds also appear in hyphenated or spaced forms. We want consistency for the learner.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got single words, tricky words, compounds. What about phrases?
Multi-word units. Good point.
Yeah, like phrases that frequently occur together, maybe on the other hand, or idioms like raining cats and dogs.
Right, and the biggest challenge there is defining these units. Are they totally fixed, or can they vary a bit? Are they grammatically complete sentences or just fragments? The source mentions core idioms. Those where the meaning really isn't obvious from the parts, like your raining cats and dogs, or maybe red herring.
Yeah, red herring's a good one.
Interestingly, a study they cite actually found surprisingly few of these truly core idioms in English. Only about 100 or so.
Really? Only 100? That feels low.
I know, right? But that was the finding for core idioms, which brings up a critical question.
How do you count them?
Well, yeah. How do you account for these multi-word units without basically double counting the individual words that make them up. If red is already on your list and herring is, do you count them again in red herring?
Seems like that would inflate the frequency of red.
Exactly. So the clear recommendation is to count multi-word units in separate lists. Keep them apart from the single-word frequency lists.
Okay.
That prevents distorting the frequency data of the individual components. It ensures accuracy in how often, say, the word red appears on its own versus in that idiom.
Gotcha. Separate lists for separate things. Makes sense. And then, like, I guess there are words that almost feel like they're not quite words.
The edges of the lexicon. Yeah.
Like sounds people make, or grr, or words that English borrowed from other languages.
Absolutely. We have marginal words, which includes hesitations like exclamations like grr or ouch,
Huh?
often with variable spelling too, which is another complication.
Right.
Then foreign words, they range from ones that are fully integrated, like elite or rendezvous,
Yeah. Feels like an English word now.
to those still considered somewhat foreign, maybe like flambe or schadenfreude.
Yeah.
Where do you draw that line?
Good question.
And then acronyms, like UK or IBM, often formed from multiple words. And some even become words in their own right, pronounced as words like laser or scuba.
Oh, yeah. I never think of laser as an acronym anymore.
Right. And many acronyms are also homonyms. Think of WHO, World Health Organization versus WHO. Adds another layer.
Wow.
It's quite telling, actually, how these categories really illustrate the dynamic, changing nature of language itself.
How so?
Well, think about it. Even a word like damn, depending on the context and maybe the perceived level of offense, it might be shifted between a main list and a marginal words list. And acronyms that are pronounced as words, not spelled out like your laser or scuba, the recommendation is often to move them to the non-acronym lists of regular content words.
Because they function like regular words.
Exactly. It reflects their full integration into the language. It shows how the people compiling these lists have to constantly adapt to how language actually evolves and is used.
Okay, so all these really meticulous decisions about what even counts as a word, how you categorize it, it all fundamentally depends on the raw material you start with, right?
Absolutely. The foundation.
The collection of texts or corpus that you build the word list from.
Yes. The corpus is everything.
And this is where purpose-driven corpus design comes in. It sounds like the nature of the corpus has to directly reflect how you intend to use the word list.
It's non-negotiable. You wouldn't use a corpus stuffed with medical journals to create a list for, say, a basic conversational English course for tourists.
Right, completely different needs. So let's look at some key factors for designing a good corpus. First, I guess, spoken versus written.
Huge difference. That's a primary distinction. The most frequent word in a typical written corpus is usually the.
Okay.
But in a spoken corpus, it's often I, or maybe you.
Interesting.
Spoken language generally uses a smaller range of vocabulary, too, compared to written texts.
Okay, so spoken versus written. What else? Topic variety.
Crucial. A corpus covering a wide range of topics, news, fiction, academic papers, conversation, will naturally yield a much longer list of different words, the types, than one focused on just a single subject area, like, say, engineering textbooks.
Makes sense. Then the age of the learners you're aiming for.
Yes, that's critical too. A corpus intended for young native speakers, for example, should reflect their typical language exposure.
Which is probably most...
Predominantly spoken input, right? From peers, family, teachers, TV, movies, much more than formal written text, especially early on.
Got it. And corpus size must matter. How big does it need to be?
It really matters, and it needs to match the frequency level of the words you're trying to capture. For example, the source suggests that to reliably capture mid-frequency words, not the super common ones, but the next tier down, you probably need a corpus of at least 25 million tokens. 25 million words.
Wow, that's massive.
It is. And even a huge corpus like the British National Corpus, the BNC, which is about 100 million words.
Still not enough for everything.
Not enough for all words beyond maybe the 13,000 word level to occur reliably, say, 50 times, which is often a threshold used.
Incredible. And finally, you mentioned subcorpora. What's that about?
Right. So to assess a word's range, meaning how many different types of texts or contexts it appears in, not just its total frequency, a large corpus is often divided into smaller, coherent, and roughly equal-sized chunks called subcorpora, maybe one for fiction, one for news, one for academic, one for spoken, etc.
So you can see if a word is used everywhere or just in one specific area.
Exactly. It ensures you're measuring a word's usefulness and versatility across diverse contexts, not just its raw count.
Okay.
And this brings us to a really crucial takeaway from the source material. They emphasize that poor corpus design will lead to poor word lists. Period.
You can't just fix it by making it bigger.
Nope. Simply increasing the size won't compensate for a fundamentally flawed or biased design. Think about the British National Corpus, BNC we mentioned. It's predominantly written about 90% and quite formal. Only 10% is book and text.
Okay.
So that inherent bias means that even word lists derived from the BNC might need subjective, human adjustments to be truly suitable for certain teaching purposes, like basic conversation.
Right, because it underrepresents everyday spoken words.
Precisely. Another major example they reference is COSIA, the Corpus of Contemporary American English. The design choices made for these massive data sets directly dictate the utility, the usefulness of the word lists they produce.
So, okay. After all this incredibly meticulous work, defining words, categorizing them, carefully selecting and designing the corpus, why? Why do we dedicate so much effort to creating these word lists?
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It really sounds like it. But it must be because they're fundamental tools, right?
Yeah.
With profound real-world application.
Absolutely fundamental.
One obvious application must be course design.
Big one.
Word lists guide educators, curriculum designers in deciding which vocabulary to actually include in language courses.
Right. What gets focused on.
And this is where that idea of Zipf's law becomes really interesting and practical.
Yes. ZIF, the power law of language.
Yeah, the idea that a tiny fraction of words like the, of, a appear constantly in almost every sentence,
The glue words.
while maybe half the unique words in any given text might appear only once.
That long tail of rare words.
Exactly. To give you some context, the 10 most frequent English words cover something like 25% to 35% of a typical text, just 10 words.
Astonishing, isn't it?
The most frequent 100 words cover around 50%, and the first 1,000 different words can cover anywhere from 70% to maybe even 90% of the words you encounter.
That's huge coverage from a relatively small number of words.
Which is why high-frequency words, traditionally the top 2,000, though now maybe more like the top 3,000, really deserve dedicated teaching focus. You get so much bang for your buck.
Definitely the priority for beginners and intermediate learners.
Although sometimes smaller, more manageable lists, say just 100 words, might be more practical for teachers focusing on short-term learning goals, right?
Sure, for a specific lesson or unit, breaking it down.
And these lists are also essential for language teaching and learning itself, aren't they?
Well, very much so. They serve as checklists, maybe, for deliberate vocabulary learning, helping learners focus their efforts.
And helping them decide, like, if you encounter an unknown word while reading, is this word frequent enough that it's actually worth learning right now?
Exactly. Resource allocation for the learner's brain.
Huh.
Yeah.
And they're critical for creating graded readers, right? Those books with simplified language.
Essential for graded materials. You have to control the vocabulary to match a learner's proficiency level. That's crucial for helping them learn from meaning-focused input, from reading itself.
Ideally, maybe a reading app or e-reader would just tell you a word's frequency level when you look it up.
That would be fantastic. A great tool for learners.
And finally, language testing. Can't forget that.
No, word lists are absolutely critical for constructing accurate vocabulary size tests and also vocabulary levels tests.
How so?
Well, early vocabulary tests sometimes just sampled words randomly from a dictionary.
Oh dear, that doesn't sound right.
It wasn't. It gave wildly inflated estimates of vocabulary size because dictionaries include tons of rare words you almost never encounter. They don't reflect actual word usage frequency at all.
So reliable tests now.
Reliable tests absolutely rely on well-designed word frequency lists, sampling words from different frequency bands to get an accurate picture.
Right, okay, that makes total sense.
And, it's incredibly illustrative to look at a real-world example where all these complex considerations actually come together. There's a study by Dang and Webb.
Okay.
They developed something called an essential word list, specifically designed for L2 beginners, second language learners, just starting out.
Ah, perfect example. What did they do?
Well, first, they chose level 2 word families, basically the lemmas we talked about as their counting unit.
Why level 2?
They recognized that absolute beginners have very limited morphological knowledge. They can't easily guess related forms like unhappy from happy. So focusing on the base word plus its simple endings made more sense.
Okay, practical choice.
But crucially, they meticulously adjusted the word frequencies they got from the corpus to enhance the list's validity for beginners.
Adjusted them. How?
Okay, so for example, remember our discussion about proper nouns?
Yeah, like mark the name versus mark the verb.
Exactly. They actually subtracted the occurrences where a word was used as a proper noun from its total frequency count.
Oh, clever.
So if the word mark appeared, say, 176 times in their data, but it was used as a proper noun 77 of those times.
They only counted the other 99 times.
Precisely. Its adjusted frequency became 99. This prevents the proper noun usage from artificially inflating its ranking as a general vocabulary word.
Wow, that's detailed. What else?
They also combine the frequencies for American and British spelling variants like program and program, treating them as the same word.
Makes sense for learners.
And importantly, they deliberately excluded certain items that might pop up in other frequency lists but aren't that useful for beginners. Things like place names, London, Paris, individual letters of the alphabet, or grammatical affixes standing alone. They really prioritize content words.
So they cleaned up the list based on the target users.
Exactly. This rigorous, thoughtful approach resulted in a really practical list, and notably includes words essential for basic spoken English, like hello, bye, and all right,
Ah, which might be missed otherwise.
which are often underrepresented or even absent in lists derived purely from predominantly written corpora, like the BNC.
Mm-hmm.
It really shows the depth of thought required to make these lists truly useful in the real world.
Okay, so we started this deep dive with what felt like a really simple question. How do you count words?
Yeah, seemed easy.
And what we've uncovered is this whole world of linguistic complexity, meticulous methodology, and really crucial decisions, all of which directly impact how languages are learned and understood.
It's layers upon layers.
The creation of word lists, it's clearly not just some dry academic exercise. It's a dynamic, evolving process that really highlights the fluid nature of language itself. And despite the immense power of computing we have now, these vast text corpora, it seems like human judgment, purpose, and a deep understanding of how language is actually used remain absolutely indispensable.
It's interesting, isn't it, that ongoing tension, that the source material notes that while technology now lets us create lists with ease, quote unquote,
Right.
the task itself is actually deceptively simple. It demands incredibly careful planning and just numerous critical decisions at every step. The author even describes working on word lists as being a bit like a black hole that seems to absorb hours and hours of work for little obvious improvement.
Wow. A black hole, that paints a picture.
It really does. It's a testament, I think, to the sheer difficulty of truly pinning down something as complex and alive as language.
So if we take all this in, what does this continuous, painstaking refinement of word lists really tell us about the nature of language itself?
Yeah, what's the bigger picture?
Is language some kind of fixed system just waiting for us to perfectly enumerate it, to count every last piece? Or is it more like a constantly shifting landscape that just defies any single definitive account?
A moving target.
And what does that mean for the dream of truly mastering a language? Or even for artificial intelligences that are striving to understand and generate human speech?
Big questions.
It leaves us with a kind of provocative thought, maybe. In this world of ever-growing data, super powerful algorithms, will we ever truly capture the definitive essence of human language in a list? Is that even possible? Or is the real value actually in the journey of trying, in the insights we gain along the way, even if the destination of a perfect list remains forever just out of reach?